It's good to see you again. Thank you for joining me in these ramblings through Ephesians. We're in chapter 1 and verse 11. And it says there that it's in him that we have obtained an inheritance, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of his will. That's quite a long way of saying that God gets what he wants. Everything is in line with his will. The movement of the cosmos, the direction of governments, your life, your salvation. It's all under his directing hand. But I realize that questions arise out of that. You don't have to be a philosopher to ask, well, how's that going to work? Am I just a robot in God's hands? And what about sin? Is God making people sin? Well, when the Bible talks about what we sometimes call the sovereignty of God, we do have to realize there are other aspects to consider. There are twin tracks, if you like, that are parallel, that God is Lord, he is directing events, he works everything out in line with his will, and alongside it there is our human responsibility, that we are free agents, accountable for what we do, for our actions and our thoughts. And there is a mystery to us about the way in which they work together. We can't fully explain them satisfactorily. However, we can see them in action in the Bible. So go back to the beginning of the Bible, Genesis. In the later part of that book, you have the story of Joseph. And to shorten that story, Joseph at the beginning is sold into slavery by his brothers who want to get rid of him because they're jealous of him. The end of the story, you need to read the whole of it for yourself. The end of the story, he's the Prime Minister of Egypt and is able, because he's in that position, to save his wider family from starvation. Now, when he explains that to his brothers, he says, you need to think of it this way. You intended it for evil, but God intended it for good. So he takes the same action and realizes that the two parties have completely different aims, that the brothers intended to dispose of him, but God intended to use that to put him in the right place to save his own people. So there's that strange combination that we can't fully explain, but you can see it there. You can see it also in the life and death of the Lord Jesus, that he was crucified in line with God's will. But God did not force people to undertake that. He simply used the evil that was there. The people affirm this. You can see it in Acts in chapter 2 and 4 and 5. There are explanations given of the way it works. But in chapter 5, they're praying and they say, well, yes, Herod, Pilate, the Gentiles, Israel, that's like the whole world basically, conspired against your holy servant Jesus. But they only did what your power and will had already decided beforehand should happen. Again, that combination of human evil taken and used to accomplish God's purpose for salvation. And that's Paul's point here, that in Ephesians, God takes everything and brings it into line with his will so that it's there to bring us to salvation. But you should also realize, as Paul writes that very encouragement, this is the great thing God has done. This applies to everything in your wider life as well. He has his hand in your life at every point, including the bad stuff, your failures and sins, your anxieties and fears about the current crisis that we're in. He's working in them for good. That's another subject altogether on its own, but he is working in them. He's not fallen asleep at the wheel. He's there with you in them, and he's utterly trustworthy, utterly faithful, loving, and able to help you. I realize that there are often deep questions that come out of this, but actually when we're confronted with something like this, actually worship is the thing that should result. But you can put yourself in his hands today. Do that. Well, you're in his hands already anyway, and there's no better place to be, but consciously put yourself in his hands today for the things that you face and find his strength in the encouragement there is that God here is with you, and he's working all things in conformity with what he wants for you. So trust him in that and be blessed in that, be strengthened in that. And I'll see you again tomorrow morning for further encouragement.